And here, for your delight, is my telling of the story of Gawain and the Green Knight. The story starts in Camelot, a wonderful place, an amazing place, where Arthur rules and peace is the law. And at Christmas time, there is a feast where all the artists of the world gather, all the storytellers linger, and there are clowns and acrobats and jugglers and knights, all from the round table, gather with their entourage to feast and to enjoy the best that there is in civilization. But feasts, well, feasts and civilization is okay. But Arthur and his knights, they sought adventure. So they had a tradition that before they ate the last of their meals, they had to have experienced one adventure. And this is a story of one such adventure. For while they were waiting with the food ready to serve, the doors of the hall opened and in walked a giant of a man. His legs were like trees and his arms boughs that brand strong in the wind, and he carried an axe. No ordinary axe, this. Its edge gleamed with sharpness, and its handle grew like a living holly tree. And the Green Knight, as such he had to be called, because he was clad in a virulent, a growing green, the brightness of spring, the depths of the forest, flowed through the embroidery on his clothes and the cloak that lay on his shoulders. As he walked in, the mystery of old things walked before him, and the newness of life not yet found. And he walked to the middle of the hall with his axe on the shoulder and laid his challenge. I look around this hall of children and wonder if any of you have the strength to play. I have a game for you. I'll give you my axe and you can swing it at me and I'll not resist. Chop my head off. And then in a year and a day, we meet again and see what happens. Who will take this game on? Who will play this challenge with me? Suddenly, most of the knights looked a little bit distracted. The ceiling was incredibly interesting. The floor, well, I haven't seen that floor in a long time. Nobody seemed overeager to give up their seats and take the stair. Arthur, of course, the boldest and best, and the slightly rash, he stood and was ready to go for the challenge and walked forwards to greet the knight, the intruder, well, now guest in his hall. But before he could accept the challenge, Gawain stepped up from beside Guinevere and walked over into the hall and said, "No, my lord, let me have the honour of taking this, of being your champion in this venture and providing renown for all your court. I will take this knight on at his game. I will play, and we will see how it goes." And Arthur sat and gave the floor to Gawain. At which the Green Knight looked at Gawain, sized him up, and handed over the axe. Knight stood in his hall, and silence was all around. The knight flicked his hair out of the way and bared his neck. "Well, Gawain, go on. See if you can cut straight and true. If you fail, it'll not be because of a lack of sharpness in the axe. And see, I'll go down on one knee, just so you don't have to stretch. Show me how you chop down trees." Gawain grabbed the axe, felt the weight of it in two hands rather than the one the giant had used, raised it and swung. It sliced through the air like a cold morning and cut clean and fine, as good a blow as could be hoped for. The head rolled off, thud, and landed on the floor in a flood of blood. But to everyone's amazement, the knight, now headless, walked over, picked up his head, and the head started to talk and laughed. Ah, Gawain, you struck straight and true. That was as painless as I could have hoped for. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy the next year. But remember our bargain. In a year and a day, we meet again, and I get to return the blow this time. Keep this axe hanging on the wall. Remind yourself. And in a year's time, seek out the Green Chapel. And I'll be there, I'll be waiting. And so will your reputation and honour. And with that, the knight walked out of the hall, carrying his head. And there was silence. And what could you do? What could you say? What strange event was this? And then the food was served, and the hall was alive with questioning and stories. And not since Cuchulainn had been seen. Wow. Who can chop off a head and walk? Can Gawain do that? It's not a normal thing for a knight to be able to do. Not even Gawain. Gawain, we may imagine, had a slightly more sombre feast, but Guinevere cheered his spirits, and, well, for a year and a day, at least he could save her life. And he did. And winter turns to spring, and spring turns to summer. The grass grows, the grain is sown and grows golden and is ready to be cut. And Gawain wandered. Then, girding himself and taking on the challenge, he gathered all his arms together. He got his great shield painted with a 5-pointed star of purity. Everything harnessed. Already he set out north. There was a cold mist across the ground as he rode, as his horse rode from Camelot out into the wilds, into the Logier, the lost lands. As he rode north, he faced challenges, he faced hardships, he fought mighty battles and did great feats, all of which I can talk about another time. And all the time he asked, have you seen the Green Chapel? Where is the Green Chapel? Have you heard of the Green Knight with the great axe like this? But no one could help him. No one could show him the way. He had to wander till he was very lost, very far away, deep, deep into the woods and the wilds in the north. So almost towards the end of the year, Christmas time again, Gawain found himself deep in the woods, in the wilds, in the hills. He was tired. His horse was tired. His equipment, once shining and bright, was now dulled with the dirt of the road. Till he saw in the distance a light. A light meant people, and people meant warmth and fellowship. And riding on, he came to a castle. And there was smoke from the roof. There was the sound of horns and a welcome as he walked in. His horse was stabled. He was welcomed by the Lord and his lady, and all gathered round. The Lord was strong, as you'd expect from a laird in these lands. The lady was lovely, and they were a perfect match. Their court, all those gathered round them, was simple but worthy. And in the corner there was an old lady wrapped in shawls and mystery. But she was soon forgotten because a feast was laid on for their guest. What news do you have? What stories do you have to tell? Where have you travelled from? Said the Lord. he was a little hungry for news and adventure. Not that many people came by this way. And Gawain told him of his journeys, and being a great knight, he saw no need to expand on his deeds, and told him his name, and told him he was from Arthur, and told him that he was on a quest, and told him of his despair, how he was getting close to the end of a year and a day, and he still had to find the Green Chapel and find the Green Knight so he could, well, complete his pact, complete his bargain. Oh, don't worry about that, said the laird of the castle. Green Chapel is only a few miles away, and you've got a few days to recover. Be my guest. I give you the hospitality of my house and my home. Oh, and I tell you what, I'm going hunting tomorrow as well. We can play a game while you're here. Anything you catch during the day, you give to me. Anything I catch while I'm out hunting, I'll give to you. Does that sound like a game? Gawain, who was always up for a challenge, said, yeah, that sounds fair to me. Sure. So they ate and they drank and they wended their weary way up the stairs lit by light to their bedrooms where they could sleep and enjoy the peace of night. And Gawain's body rested on the bed rather than the bare earth, and the stress and the strain of his quest began to seep from his limbs, and all he had to do was be ready in a few days' time to meet the Green Knight. Oh, and learn how to take a blow on his neck and live. But there's no sense in worrying about things you can't do anything about. So he slept and he dreamed. And then, almost still in the dream, he noticed that a lady was looking at him, and it was morning. And he pulled his cloak around him quite quickly because it had been a warm room, well heated with a fire, and he saw no need to burden himself with too much clothing. The lady laughed. There's nothing there that I've not seen before. Aye, but you've not seen it on me, said Gawain. She laughed again. And they talked of trifles, and they talked of adventures. And yet the lady seemed surprised and confused. How can this be the Gawain I've heard of? Really? The Gawain I've heard of, and sitting here with a lady, and not trying to steal a kiss, or take a kiss when it's freely offered. And Gawain looked a little surprised. Here he was in another man's castle, but he was a knight, and it's a warrior's gaze to do the will of a woman. So quick with wit and not tongue-tied like me, he made a generous reply and made the lady laugh. And the lady kissed him once and said, relax, don't worry. I will teach you more of lovemaking later. Breakfast awaits. And they went up and they went down to the hall and they enjoyed a beautiful breakfast and a good day as well. And the sun was in the sky and Gawain was enjoying what might be the last few days of his life. The Lord, he returned home later in the day, having been hunting in the forest and having caught deer. And the leanest of the deer had 2 fingers worth of fat underneath its skin. And the feast that evening was going to be mighty. And as he walked in, he said, all of this I have for you, skinned and ready. What have you found for me? At which Gawain threw his arms around his host and gave him a kiss. Ha! said the laird of the castle. That's a fine thing to have been catching. I wonder where you got that from. At which Gawain laughed and said, nah, that's not part of the bargain. I've given you what I got, and thank you for giving me what you've got. Let's eat. So they feasted, and they feasted royally and well, and Gawain began to feel his strength coming back after his hard journey. And night fell down like a soft blanket over the castle, each to their own rooms, retired, and Gawain slept. The next morning, he was woken again by a soft voice and a song. A soft voice and a song of seduction. A soft voice and a song that greeted the morning wood with joy. And the lady, indeed, was well versed in lovemaking and wanted to pass on her expertise to Gawain, who politely declined. Well, declined as much as it is honourable to. And when the laird returned from hunting that evening, it was 2 kisses that he was given, and still no news of where they'd been found. But the laird had caught a boar, bristling and bright, a warrior's prize, and the boar skin was spread and ready, and the boar itself was roasting in a hero's hall to make a storyteller's eyes light up. They ate well, and once more retired to bed. And before they retired, Gawain, knowing that the day was growing near where he would have to meet the Green Man, asked about the route. Don't worry, he said. Tomorrow is the day you can go. You will meet your fate. You'll complete your quest, and all of it can be done in a couple of hours. So rest, sleep well, and I'll hunt early and come back. We can exchange our gifts and I'll show you and you'll be there in time. This time, when Gawain awoke, the lady was there and waiting. To say she was persistent would not be entirely true, but she knew what she wanted, and her talk of Gawain's greatness and his reputation was enough to make certain matters rise. But Gawain himself was not unskilled in escaping tricky situations, and they talked for a while, inconclusively, until the lady offered him her ring. Red gold with rubies, prized gemstones. She offered it to him. But Gawain said, no, today I go to meet the Green Knight. This is not a day for exchanging gifts. No, please keep your ring. I have nothing to give you, and I will take nothing from you. You've already been generous, far too generous. The lady then said, well, if you won't take that, then at least take my girdle. Here, it is green and gold, embroidered and woven with spells. This girdle, when worn, will protect you from all harm. No blade will cleave your skin with this wrapped round your waist. And at that, Gawain thought, this old truth might be handy, this old magic. I mean, there's no way that the Green Knight did everything he's done through fair chivalrous means. And so he took the girdle and wrapped it discreetly round his waist, hidden from sight. So when he met the lord of the house again, and the lord of the house said, the hunting was not so good today. I just caught a fox. It's a nice fox, but here, have a fox. Gawain embraced him warmly, thanked him for his hospitality, gave him 3 kisses, and refused to say where they'd come from again, and headed out towards the Green Chapel. His horse was not happy to be starting out again. But Gawain, girded for war, garlanded with a sword and with a shield ready, rode on. He rode through the trees, and the trees became close. And then the very earth itself began to open itself in an embrace. And he rode through a canyon where the green leached into the air. an old place, an ancient place. And walking through, leaving his horse behind, he came to a glade with a chapel. And in the chapel, there was a candle burning, and the candle summoned him closer, till he sat down, looking at the chapel door, and saw standing there the Green Knight. Gawain held out his axe, the axe that had been given a year before, and said, "At last I find you, sir. It is time for us to make our pact. I have taken your head, taken the blow, and now I'm here to return the favour." The Green Knight grabbed hold of the axe and gestured to Gawain to stand next to him. Gawain stood, flicked his hair and bared his neck. The knight, in one hand, he was strong and mighty, lifted the axe, swung it high, and then stopped. Gawain looked. "You flinched." "Did not." A second time, Gawain cleared his hair from his neck. You don't want to get your hair cut, huh? Bared his neck. The knight lifted the axe, drew it back, and singing it sliced through the air and stopped. "I was just checking you were ready. Didn't want you flinching and me taking off an ear or something like that." Gawain said, "Right, look, just get on with it. This waiting is doing my head in." The Green Man lifted the axe, lifted it high, and swung down and sliced a scar across Gawain's neck, but didn't go any further. And Gawain looked around, and his blood was up, and he reached for his sword, and he reached for his shield, and he turned to face the Green Knight and realized that the Green Knight was just standing there. And as he stood there, layers of illusion fell from him and fled like a shadow back to the old woman who'd been in the hall the first night he'd arrived. "Good morning." And standing in front of him, Gawain saw the Lord whose hall he'd been feasting in for a year. And the Lord looked at him and said, "Yes. Well, you've passed the test, is the good news. You arrived here, you came here, you stood, you were ready to receive the blow. But that green that's round your waist shows that it's not by your own strength that you were able to do this, was it? You've been honourable with my lady, and I'll be honourable with you. But take that scar and take that girdle, and remember that mortal man and mortal rules only go so far. The great Lord we celebrate at Christmas, he came back from the dead. But us humans, there's only so far we can go." And Gawain mounted his horse and rode back down to the south, back to the court of Arthur, wondering what reputation he would have, what reception he would get for having achieved his quest, but not fully achieved it. Would he be shamed? Would he be ridiculed? Would he be cast out to the countryside and considered a pagan and not welcomed into the civilization and the heights of Camelot? But when he arrived, he was greeted. He'd been missed by all. He was given his seat at the round table, and to show solidarity, brotherhood with their fellow knight, and acceptance that, well, they hadn't even stood up. All of them, ever after, wore a garter of green to remind themselves of the girdle and remind themselves that heroes need to accept that they can't do everything and need to be taught. And that's my telling of the story. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back for more sometime.